Before the night was over, the smallest dog at Atlas' house would find the man everyone else was too late to reach. But at sunrise, Milo was still afraid of the grass. The morning came soft over the blue ridge, pale gold spilling across the pasture behind the old farmhouse, turning every blade of wet grass into a line of light. Mist hovered low near the fence posts. The porch boards smelled of rain from the night before, pine soap from yesterday's cleaning, and the faint leather scent of Caleb Rowe's old work gloves hanging by the door. Caleb sat on the bottom step with his elbows resting loosely on his knees, a white former United States Marine with quiet eyes, a dark field jacket, and the kind of patience that looked simple only because it had cost him so much to learn. Beside him lay a worn cotton handkerchief, folded once, carrying the smell of coffee, engine oil, cedar shavings, and the calm human presence that held Atlas' house together. Atlas stood in the yard, a strong German shepherd with sable and black fur, amber eyes steady beneath the first sunlight, his working dog collar resting against his neck. He had already sniffed the handkerchief. He had already walked the short line from porch to yard and back again. Now he waited, not for Caleb, but for the puppy trembling near the open door. Milo was small for a German shepherd pup, all soft paws, oversized ears, and fear too big for his body. He had come to Atlas' house 2 days earlier after a rescue transport brought in 3 young dogs needing quiet care. The others had eaten, slept, and explored within hours. Milo had not. He watched doorways as if they might close without warning. He startled at the creak of floorboards, the clink of a bowl, the shift of wind through the screen. Even the morning seemed like too much for him. Caleb did not call him. Atlas did not rush him. That was the first lesson. Safe things did not chase. Atlas lowered his head and took one slow step toward the handkerchief, then looked back at Milo. The puppy pressed himself against the doorframe, eyes wide, paws planted on the porch like the yard was an ocean he could not cross. Atlas laid down in the grass, making himself smaller, softer, less like a teacher and more like a promise. Caleb watched without moving. A crow called from the tree line. Somewhere down the road, a pickup passed, tires humming over damp pavement. Milo flinched, then looked at Atlas again. The older dog stayed where he was, breathing slowly, the handkerchief between them like a tiny flag of trust. After a long moment, Milo lifted one paw. He set it on the top step, then another. His body shook, but he did not turn back. Caleb let the silence hold him. Atlas blinked once, calm as sunrise. Milo reached the handkerchief, lowered his nose, and breathed in Caleb's scent. It was only a breath. Only a puppy touching cloth on a porch. But before that day ended, that same scent would become a road through darkness, and the little dog who feared every sound would be the one brave enough to follow it home. Caleb Rowe had built Atlas' house for dogs like Milo, though he had not known Milo's name when he painted the doors blue and fixed the quiet latches with his own hands. The old farmhouse sat on 3 acres outside Asheville, where the road curved gently past pasture fences and the blue ridge rose in the distance like a prayer held against the sky. It was not a large rescue center. It had no bright lobby, no polished sign, no crowd of visitors moving through at noon. It was a house with a porch light that stayed on, a yard where frightened dogs could learn the shape of open space, 6 clean rooms in the side building, and a man who believed healing should never be rushed for the sake of human pride. Caleb was a white former United States Marine, still broad through the shoulders, still careful in the way he entered a room, still carrying the discipline of a life that had once been measured in orders, miles, and responsibility. But after the service, he had learned another kind of duty. Softer, slower, harder in ways he had not expected. He learned that a dog who trembled at a bowl did not need a louder command. He learned that a closed door could feel different to every soul that heard it click. He learned that sometimes the bravest thing a person could do was sit still long enough for fear to stop bracing for impact. Atlas had taught him that. Years earlier, when Caleb came home with too much silence inside him, Atlas became the steady weight beside his chair, the warm body against his knee, the living reminder that morning still required a walk, water still needed filling, and loyalty did not always arrive with speeches. So Caleb named the house after him because Atlas was not just his dog. Atlas was the reason the house existed. Every detail carried that lesson. The water bowls were placed where no dog had to step too far into a room to drink. The hall light stayed low and warm. The gates moved without clanging. The blankets were washed in unscented soap. The back pasture was divided by short fences, so small victories could happen in small spaces. Milo was the smallest victory waiting to happen. He had arrived 2 days before, tucked near the back of a rescue transport with his paws under his chest and his ears trembling at every bump in the road. His file said young male German Shepherd, under 1 year, nervous, low confidence, no known training. Caleb read the notes once, then set them aside. Files could name symptoms. They could not measure courage. Now, as morning widened over the yard, Atlas returned to the handkerchief and touched it with his nose again. Milo watched from the porch step, one paw still lifted as if the earth might change its mind beneath him. Caleb kept his voice low. "That is it, little man." Not a command. Not pressure. Just a thread of sound laid gently across the space between them. Atlas took 3 steps into the grass, then stopped. Milo stared at the damp blades. His nose twitched. The scent was there. Caleb's handkerchief. Atlas's path. Home behind him. Morning ahead. After a long trembling second, Milo stepped down into the yard. Milo did not trust the grass at first. The moment his front paws touched the damp yard, his whole body tightened, as if the ground itself might ask something from him. The blades brushed his legs. A drop of water slid from a bent stem onto his paw, and he jerked back half an inch, ears folding, eyes darting toward the porch. Caleb remained seated on the bottom step, hands open, shoulders still. Atlas stood 6 feet away in the grass, turned slightly sideways so the puppy would not feel stared down. The older German Shepherd lowered his nose to Caleb's handkerchief, breathed in, then took 3 slow steps along the faint scent path Caleb had laid before sunrise. The handkerchief had been dragged gently over the grass, around a flat stone, past the old fence post, and back toward the porch. Nothing difficult, nothing far, just a small trail, made for a small heart learning that the world could be followed instead of feared. Milo watched Atlas move. The puppy's nose twitched once, then again. Caleb saw the moment curiosity became stronger than panic, but he did not name it. Naming it might have made it too heavy. Atlas stopped beside the flat stone and looked back, not directly at Milo's eyes, but just near enough to invite him. Milo took 1 step, then another. His paws sank into the wet grass, and his body shivered from tail to shoulders. A breeze moved through the trees beyond the pasture, scattering the soft smell of leaves, soil, and morning. Milo froze. Atlas immediately lay down where he was, chin low, patient as the hills. Caleb leaned forward only slightly. "Easy," he said, the word barely louder than breath. "You are doing fine." Milo turned his head toward him. The porch was close. Safety was close. Running back would have been easy. Instead, the puppy lowered his nose to the ground. He found the scent. Caleb's coffee. Cedar from the porch boards. A trace of clean cotton. The same scent from the handkerchief. The same scent that lived in the house where bowls were full and doors stayed open. Milo followed it to the flat stone. When he reached Atlas, the older dog did not celebrate. He simply stood and moved another 3 steps, slow enough for courage to keep up. That was the rhythm of the morning. Sniff. Step. Stop. Breathe. Again. Sometimes Milo lost the line and sat down, confused by wind or fear. Each time, Atlas circled back without frustration, placing his own paws beside the trail, showing the puppy where to begin again. Caleb watched the lesson unfold and felt something inside him soften. He had seen strict training yards. He had heard sharp commands echo off concrete. This was different. This was not about control. This was about return. By the time the sun cleared the tree line, Milo had followed the scent from the porch to the fence and back twice. On the 3rd try, Caleb placed the handkerchief under the old wooden bench near the back gate. Milo hesitated, searched the grass, circled once, then found it. He lifted the cloth in his small mouth and carried it awkwardly toward the porch. Atlas walked beside him like a quiet escort. Caleb did not clap. He did not startle the miracle by making it perform. He only reached down when Milo came close and let the puppy drop the handkerchief near his boot. "Good," Caleb whispered. Milo looked up at him for 1 brief second before stepping back to Atlas's side. It was not trust yet, but it was a road. And every road, Caleb knew, begins by proving that 1 step can lead home. By late morning, Milo had learned the path to the old bench, the flat stone, and the back gate. But the hallway inside Atlas' house still frightened him. The yard had sunlight. The yard had Atlas. The yard had wind, birds, and enough open space for a small dog to choose distance when the world felt too close. The hallway was different. It held shadows under doors, the soft echo of Caleb's boots, the occasional click of a latch even when Caleb had made every latch as quiet as he could. After the third scent lesson, Caleb brought the handkerchief inside and laid it on the wooden floor just beyond the kitchen doorway. Milo stood at the threshold, nose lifted, ears tilted forward and back, unable to decide which part of him wanted to follow and which part wanted to vanish. Atlas did not push past him. The older German shepherd stepped into the hall first, turned around, and came back out, showing the puppy that the passage did not swallow him. Then he did it again. Milo watched closely. Caleb sat on a low stool near the kitchen table, hands resting around a mug of coffee that had gone cold. He kept his body angled away, giving Milo the gift of not being studied. "Small steps," he murmured. Atlas touched the handkerchief with his nose, then moved 3 feet down the hallway and stopped. Milo lowered his head. The scent was familiar now. Coffee, cotton, Caleb, home. He stepped inside. The floor creaked under one paw, and he froze so hard his little shoulders rose. Caleb did not move. Atlas lay down at once, chin to the floor. The house held its breath around them. A dryer hummed from the care room. Sunlight made a pale square across the hall. Milo took another step, then reached the handkerchief and stood over it as if he had discovered a tiny island in unfamiliar water. Atlas rose and walked ahead again, this time toward the open door of the care room, where clean towels sat folded on shelves and a bowl of fresh water waited near the wall. Milo followed halfway, lost the scent when a breeze moved through the screen, and sat down, trembling. Atlas came back without complaint. That was the lesson Caleb wanted most to remember. Training was not a straight line. Healing was not either. All day, Atlas taught by returning. When Milo hesitated near the hallway, Atlas returned. When Milo stepped away from the water bowl, Atlas returned. When Milo startled at the sound of Jesse placing supplies on the porch, Atlas returned and stood beside him until the puppy remembered how to breathe. By afternoon, Milo could walk from the kitchen to the care room and back with the handkerchief in his mouth. His ears were still uncertain. His paws still moved carefully. But he no longer looked as if every doorway was a question with only one wrong answer. Caleb knelt near the porch as Milo dropped the cloth by his boot once more. He opened his palm, but did not reach. Milo leaned forward, sniffed Caleb's hand, and stepped back to Atlas. The miracle remained small. A hallway crossed. A scent remembered. A teacher who never rushed. Yet Caleb had learned that small miracles were often the ones God trusted with the largest nights. By late afternoon, the sky over Asheville began to change. The blue softened into gray, then deepened toward purple above the tree line, and a restless wind moved through the pasture with the smell of rain hidden inside it. Caleb noticed the shift while checking the back gate. Atlas noticed it sooner. His ears lifted toward the west, where the clouds were gathering behind the ridge, and Milo, tired from the day's small victories, curled on the porch blanket with Caleb's handkerchief tucked beneath one paw. For the first time since arriving, the puppy had chosen to rest near the open door instead of behind it. Caleb saw that and let himself feel grateful, but only quietly. Gratitude, like trust, did not need to be loud to be real. The handkerchief had been carried across the yard 3 times, through the hallway twice, and once from the care room back to the porch without Milo dropping it in fear. Each return had placed a little more courage into his small body. Atlas had watched every attempt with the grave patience of an old teacher, never correcting with force, never rushing the lesson, always going back when Milo got lost. Then the phone rang inside the kitchen. The sound was ordinary, but it cut through the stillness sharply enough that Milo lifted his head. Caleb stepped in and answered. It was Mr. Whitaker, the elderly neighbor who lived half a mile down the narrow dirt road, near the edge of the woods where the power lines ran low between the trees. His voice sounded thin with worry. The wind had knocked out power to part of his property, and his backup generator would not start. The refrigerator held medication that needed to stay cold, and the county service truck would not arrive until morning. Caleb looked through the window toward the darkening sky. "I will come take a look," he said. He hung up, reached for his flashlight, and pulled his jacket from the chair. Atlas stood at once. Milo stood too, then startled at his own movement and stepped back. Caleb looked from the older shepherd to the puppy. Atlas wanted to go. Caleb could see it in the straight line of his body, in the focus of his amber eyes. But Milo's confidence was still new, thin as morning ice. Leaving him alone with a storm coming felt wrong. Caleb clipped Atlas's leash to the hook by the door, but did not pick it up. "Stay with him," he said softly. Atlas looked at the road, then at Caleb, then at Milo. It was not obedience alone that made him sit. It was understanding. Caleb crouched near the porch, close enough for Milo to smell him, far enough not to crowd him. He picked up the handkerchief, pressed it once against his palm, and placed it back on the blanket. "I will be back," he told them. The words were simple, the kind people say before leaving, trusting the world to keep its side of the promise. Milo watched Caleb walk down the steps, cross the gravel, and disappear along the dirt road toward Mr. Whitaker's place. The wind pushed the trees into a low whisper. Atlas remained seated under the porch light, steady as a guardian. Milo lowered his nose to the handkerchief and breathed in the scent of the man who had not rushed him, the scent he had followed all morning, the scent that meant home. Far down the road, Caleb's flashlight flickered once between the trees, then vanished into the coming dark. 1 hour passed, and the road stayed dark. Then another. The rain came softly at first, tapping the porch roof in scattered notes, then harder, until the yard blurred into silver lines and the pasture disappeared beyond the fence. Atlas stood at the top step with his body angled toward the dirt road, ears high, nose working through the wet air. Milo lay on the blanket behind him, but he was not sleeping. Every sound made him lift his head. Rain in the gutters, wind in the screens, a branch brushing the side of the house. The world had grown large again, and the little German shepherd felt himself shrinking beneath it. Jessie arrived just after 8 with a bag of towels she had forgotten to drop off earlier. Her headlights swept across the driveway, and Milo scrambled to his feet, startled by the sudden light. Atlas did not move. He only glanced back once, and Milo froze beside the blanket, breathing fast. Jessie stepped onto the porch, rain shining on her jacket. "Where is Caleb?" she asked softly. Atlas gave no answer, but his stare toward the road said enough. Jessie checked her phone. No message. She called Caleb once. Then again. Both times, the call failed before ringing through. The storm had pushed the cell service down into silence. Jessie looked toward Mr. Whitaker's place, hidden beyond the trees. "He should have been back by now," she whispered. Atlas stepped down one stair. Milo watched him. The older dog went to the blanket, lowered his nose to the handkerchief, and breathed in Caleb's scent. Then he looked directly at Milo. It was the same lesson from Sunrise. Same cloth, same scent, same quiet invitation. Only now the grass was black with rain, the road was slick, and the safe porch behind Milo glowed like the last warm place on earth. Milo trembled. He took one step backward toward the open door. Jessie crouched, but did not reach for him. "It is all right, little guy," she said, voice low. Atlas picked up the handkerchief gently and carried it to the edge of the porch. He set it down where the rain could touch it, then waited. Milo stared at the cloth. Caleb's scent rose from it, softened by water, but still there. Coffee, cotton, cedar, the steady human who had sat still all morning. Atlas stepped into the rain and moved toward the gate, then stopped, looking back. Milo's paws shifted. Fear told him to stay under the roof. The lesson told him to follow. From somewhere far down the road, thunder rolled over the ridge, deep and slow. Milo flinched, but this time he did not run. He lowered his nose to the handkerchief, took in the scent, and stepped off the porch into the wet grass. Jessie covered her mouth with one hand. Atlas waited until Milo reached him, then turned toward the dirt road. The gate stood open just enough for them to pass. Together, the old shepherd and the frightened puppy moved into the rain, one steady, one shaking, both following the invisible thread Caleb had left behind. The porch light faded behind them. The road ahead smelled of mud, leaves, and the man who had promised to come back. The rain changed the scent trail, but it did not erase it. Atlas moved first down the dirt road, steady and low, his paws silent in the mud, his nose lifting whenever the wind shifted through the trees. Milo followed close behind, smaller, soaked, and shaking so hard his legs seemed to argue with every step. But he did not turn back. The porch light of Atlas' house had disappeared behind the bend, and the world ahead was a narrow tunnel of wet leaves, dark gravel, and rain whispering through the branches. Jesse followed at a careful distance with a flashlight, letting Atlas lead without crowding the dogs. Every few yards, Milo stopped and lowered his nose to the ground. The scent was faint now, broken by rainwater running along the tire tracks, scattered by wind, mixed with pine needles, earth, and the sharp mineral smell of the storm. Atlas found the main path toward Mr. Whitaker's house, but near the old mailbox by the split-rail fence, he stopped. The road divided there. One track continued toward the lit windows of the house. Another narrow path curved behind the property toward the storage shed and generator pad. Atlas lifted his head, reading the air. Milo stepped past him before he realized he had done it. His nose dropped to a patch of soaked grass beside the fence. He circled once, then twice, a small dark shape in the rain, following something Atlas had missed because the wind had pushed Caleb's scent low and sideways. Milo found a cedar branch bent near the path. On it clung the faintest trace of Caleb's jacket, the same cedar, coffee, cotton, and engine oil that had lived in the handkerchief all morning. The puppy froze. Atlas watched him. Jesse whispered, "What is it?" Milo did not know the words. He only knew the lesson. Find the scent. Take 3 steps. Stop. Breathe. Again. He moved down the narrow path. Atlas followed. Jesse's flashlight shook slightly as she hurried behind them. Mr. Whitaker's house glowed dimly through the rain, but the dogs passed it and went toward the small shed at the back of the property, where the generator sat under a tin awning. The shed door was closed, its old frame swollen from the weather. Water ran from the roof in steady streams. Milo stopped 10 feet away, ears flat, nose lifted toward the crack beneath the door. Then came a sound from inside, faint beneath the rain. A human voice. Caleb's voice. "Atlas." The older shepherd rushed to the door and barked once, deep and urgent. Milo startled, but he did not flee. He stepped closer, planted his wet paws in the mud, and barked too. The sound was small, high, and trembling, but it carried. Once, twice, then again, stronger. Jesse ran to the shed and called Caleb's name. From the house, Mr. Whitaker's porch light snapped on. A minute later, he appeared with another flashlight, moving carefully through the rain. Caleb spoke from inside the shed, calm but tired, explaining that the old door had jammed after the power failed and his phone had no signal. Nothing dramatic, nothing grand, just darkness, swollen wood, bad timing, and a man waiting for someone to hear him. But the one who heard first was the puppy who had been afraid of grass that morning. Milo stood beside Atlas, rain dripping from his whiskers, barking until every light in the yard turned toward them. Mr. Whitaker reached the shed first, his flashlight beam wobbling across the rain-dark boards as Jesse hurried beside him. The old door had swollen tight in its frame, stuck hard enough that Caleb could not push it open from inside, but loose enough for his voice to slip through the narrow seam beneath the handle. "I am all right," he called, calm as ever, though the tired edge in his voice made Atlas press closer to the door. Jesse found a flat pry bar hanging beside the generator cover, and Mr. Whitaker worked it carefully into the gap, not forcing, only easing the wet wood until the latch finally gave with a heavy pop. The door opened inward a few inches, then wider, and Caleb stepped into the rain with one hand braced on the frame and the other shielding his eyes from the sudden flashlights. His jacket was damp, his hair dark with sweat and weather, and a streak of dust marked one sleeve, but he was standing. Safe. The first thing he looked for was not the generator, not the road, not even Jesse. His eyes dropped to the 2 German shepherds at the edge of the light. Atlas stood tall, chest rising hard, rain running down his sable coat. Beside him, Milo looked impossibly small, soaked from ears to paws, trembling so fiercely that the handkerchief in his mouth shook with him. Caleb went very still. Milo had carried it all the way there. Through the road, through the rain, through every sound that should have sent him running back to the porch. Caleb crouched slowly in the mud, careful not to reach too fast. "You found me," he whispered. Milo stared at him, eyes wide, not sure whether the night had become too big again. Atlas stepped forward first and touched his nose to Caleb's shoulder, then turned back toward the puppy, as if making the introduction all over again. Caleb opened his palm near his knee. He did not call. He did not ask. He only waited in the rain. Milo took one step, then another. His paws slipped slightly, but he kept coming. When he reached Caleb, he lowered his head and placed the wet handkerchief into Caleb's open hand. Then, after a long shivering breath, he touched his small nose to Caleb's fingers. Jessie covered her mouth, her eyes shining in the flashlight glow. Mr. Whitaker removed his cap and looked away toward the trees, giving the moment privacy. Caleb closed his fingers gently around the handkerchief, but not around Milo. Not yet. He knew courage needed room even after it arrived. "Good boy," he said, voice rough and soft. Atlas gave one low breath beside them, almost a sigh. The rain began to lighten, falling now in smaller drops from the tin roof and tree branches. Caleb stood slowly, and this time Milo did not retreat behind Atlas. He stayed close, shoulder nearly brushing Caleb's boot, as if checking that the man he had followed through the dark was truly there. They walked back together, Jessie carrying the flashlight, Mr. Whitaker thanking them again and again from his porch, Atlas leading the road home with quiet pride, and Milo following the scent no longer as a lesson, but as proof. The night had not made him fearless. It had shown him that fear could come along and still not choose the way. By morning, the storm had washed the world clean. Sunlight rose slowly over the blue ridge, touching the wet pasture, the fence rails, the porch steps, and the old farmhouse as if nothing frightening had ever moved through the night. Atlas' house smelled of rain, coffee, warm towels, and damp fur drying near the kitchen vent. Caleb had slept only a few hours, but when he opened the back door, Atlas was already waiting beside it, calm and steady, and Milo stood just behind him. The puppy was tired. His ears drooped slightly, and his paws were still marked with traces of yesterday's mud, but something in his eyes had changed. Not confidence exactly, something quieter. The knowledge that he had been afraid and had gone anyway. Caleb stepped onto the porch with the old handkerchief folded in his palm. He looked across the yard to the flat stone, the bench, the back gate, the same small path that had seemed impossible the morning before. Then he placed the handkerchief on the bottom step and sat beside it. Atlas moved first, as always. He sniffed the cloth, walked into the grass, and stopped near the flat stone. Milo watched him. The puppy lowered his nose to the handkerchief, breathed in Caleb's scent, and stepped down from the porch without shaking. The grass was still wet. A crow called from the trees. Somewhere down the road, Mr. Whitaker's generator hummed softly back to life. Milo followed the scent path across the yard, past the flat stone, under the old bench, and toward the back gate. Once, he paused when a breeze stirred the leaves, but Atlas only waited ahead, and Caleb said nothing. Milo found the cloth where Caleb had placed it near the fence, picked it up carefully in his mouth, and turned back. His steps were clumsy, still puppy small, but they did not retreat. He came all the way to the porch and laid the handkerchief at Caleb's boot. Caleb looked down at him for a long moment, then opened his hand. Milo touched his nose to Caleb's palm and stayed there one breath longer than he had the night before. Atlas stood beside them, sunlight resting along his sable coat, his amber eyes soft with something almost like pride. Caleb did not say that Milo was brave. He did not have to. The whole yard seemed to know. Later, Jessie would tell the story as the night a frightened puppy found a marine in the rain, and Mr. Whitaker would keep a fresh flashlight by his back door forever after. But Caleb would remember something smaller. A puppy on wet grass at sunrise, a handkerchief carrying the scent of home, and Atlas teaching without a single word that courage was not the absence of fear. Courage was following love while fear walked beside you. From that morning on, Milo was still gentle, still cautious, still learning the world one sound at a time. But whenever Caleb placed the handkerchief on the porch, the little dog stepped forward. And in the quiet light of Atlas' house, a miracle that began with one breath became a road home.